War against God, issuing in the proclamation of the reign of nothingness, which means the triumph of incoherence and absurdity, the whole plan presided over by Satan. This, in brief, is the theology and the meaning of nihilism. But man cannot live by such blatant negation. Unlike Satan, he cannot even desire it for its own sake, but only by mistaking it for something positive and good. And, in fact, no nihilist, apart from a few moments of frenzy and enthusiasm, or perhaps despair, has ever seen his negation as anything but the means to a higher goal. Nihilism furthers its satanic ends by means of a positive program. The most violent revolutionaries, a Nechayev or Bakunin, a Lenin or Hitler, and even the demented practitioners of the propaganda of the deed, dreamed of the new order their violent destructions of the old order would make possible. Dada and anti-literature seek not the total destruction of art, but the path to a new art. The passive nihilist, in his existential apathy and despair, sustains life only by the vague hope that he may yet find some kind of ultimate satisfaction in a world that seems to deny it. The content of the nihilist dream is, then, a positive one, but truth requires that we view it in a proper perspective, not through the rose-colored spectacles of the nihilist himself, but in the realistic manner our century's intimate acquaintance with nihilism permits. Armed with the knowledge this acquaintance affords, and with the Christian truth which enables us to interpret it aright, we shall attempt to look behind the nihilist phrases to see the realities they conceal. Seen in this perspective, the very phrases which to the nihilist seem entirely positive appear to the Orthodox Christian in another light, as items in a program quite different from that of nihilist apologetics. The first and most obvious item in the program of nihilism is the destruction of the old order. The old order was the soil nourished by Christian truth in which men had their roots. Its laws and institutions, and even its customs, were founded in that truth and dedicated to teaching it. Its buildings were erected to the glory of God and were a visible sign of His order upon earth. Even the generally primitive but natural living conditions served unintentionally, of course, as a reminder of man's humble place here, of his dependency upon God for even the few earthly blessings he possessed, and of his true home, which lies beyond this vale of tears in the kingdom of heaven. Effective war against God and His truth requires the destruction of every element of this old order. It is here that the peculiar nihilist virtue of violence comes into play. Violence is no merely incidental aspect of the nihilist revolution, but a part of its essence. According to Marxist dogma, force is the midwife of every old society pregnant with a new one. Appeals to violence, and even a kind of ecstasy at the prospect of its use, abound in revolutionary literature. Bakunin invoked the evil passions and called for the unchaining of popular anarchy in the cause of universal destruction. And his revolutionary catechism is the primer of ruthless violence. Marx was fervent in his advocacy of revolutionary terror as the means of hastening the advent of communism. Lenin defined the dictatorship of the proletariat as a domination that is untrammeled by law and based on violence. Demagogic enticement of the masses and the arousing of the basest passions for revolutionary purposes have long been standard nihilist practice. The spirit of violence has been most thoroughly incarnated in our century by the nihilist regimes of Bolshevism and National Socialism. It is to these that there have been assigned the principal roles in the nihilist task of the destruction of the old order. The two, whatever their psychological dissimilarities and the historical accidents which placed them in opposing camps, have been partners in their frenzied accomplishment of this task. Bolshevism, to be sure, has had the more positive role of the two, since it has been able to justify its monstrous crimes by an appeal to a pseudo-Christian, messianic idealism which Hitler scorned. Hitler's role in the Nihilist program was more specialized and provincial, but nonetheless essential. Even in failure, in fact, precisely in the failure of its ostensible aims, Nazism served the cause of this program. Quite apart from the political and ideological benefits which the Nazi interlude in European history gave to the communist powers, communism, it is now widely and erroneously believed, if evil in itself, still cannot be as evil as Nazism. Nazism had another, more obvious and direct function. Goebbels explained this function in his radio broadcasts in the last days of the war. The bomb terror spares the dwellings of neither rich nor poor. Before the labor offices of total war, the last class barriers have had to go down. Together with the monuments of culture, there crumble also the last obstacles to the fulfillment of our revolutionary task. Now that everything is in ruins, we are forced to rebuild Europe. In the past, private possessions tied us to a bourgeoisie restraint. Now the bombs, instead of killing all Europeans, have only smashed the prison walls which kept them captive. In trying to destroy Europe's future, the enemy has only succeeded in smashing its past, and with that, everything old and outworn has gone. Nazism, thus, in its war, have done for Central Europe, and less thoroughly for Western Europe, what Bolshevism did in its revolution for Russia, destroyed the old order, and thus cleared the way for the building of a new. Bolshevism, then, had no difficulty in taking over where Nazism had left off. Within a few years, the whole of Central Europe had passed under the dictatorship of the proletariat, i.e., Bolshevist tyranny, for which Nazism had effectively prepared the way. The nihilism of Hitler was too pure, too unbalanced, to have more than a negative, preliminary role to play in the whole nihilist program. Its role, like the role of the purely negative first phase of Bolshevism, is now finished, and the next stage belongs to a power possessing a more complete view of the whole revolution, the Soviet power, upon which Hitler bestowed, in effect, his inheritance in the words, "The future belongs solely to the stronger Eastern nation."